Proposition 47 was passed about 10 years ago by state voters, and it made some dramatic changes in how the state treats with drugs and theft. It was billed as an effort to reduce prison populations by getting smaller offenders out of jails and out of prisons. And I appreciated that it may have been well-intended. I could see that it was problematic, and I didn't personally vote for it, but it passed. And it did two things that were really have been exacerbating our entire problem with homelessness in this state. But let me frame a little bit of my background. Many years ago, when I was a student at Santa Monica High School, right there on the beach, there were a series of overdoses amongst my classmates. There were kids passing out from using various drugs. What appeared to have happened is that drugs that were used generally in poorer communities had transitioned into middle-class environments, and they were taking a toll. And I was a student leader. I actually got invited to train with a group of mental health professionals, psychologists, social workers, ministers, and we created a helpline, a telephone helpline, like a suicide prevention line, to provide immediate 24-hour counseling to people who were going through some kind of a very negative or dangerous experience with drugs or in their own life. And I did that for 2 years. I was on call for 24 hours. That led me to get a BA in psychology. I worked at the UCLA Counseling Center for students, and also founded at UCLA an Office of Drug Education. So I have some background in this, and then the more important backdrop is I had a younger brother who was a drug addict. And he's no longer with us because a combination of diabetes, alcoholism, and drug addiction took his life early. But I watched my parents cope with that. And when I look around my community of Venice Beach, to some extent, I see my brother out there. If my parents had not converted a garage into a bedroom and given him his own space, he would have very likely been out there on the street. So I've been watching this whole phenomenon of drug use in American culture for a long time. And here I am now, president of a small nonprofit in Venice Beach, California, which has the second or third largest homeless population in the city of Los Angeles. It's either us or it's Hollywood after Skid Row. How do you address that? Some will say it's a housing issue. My experience is that it's a drug addiction, it's a mental health, and it's also a failure of the justice system. And I'll tell you why and how. Again, 10 years ago, we all voted, not myself, but the state, voted to decriminalize possession of a small amount of 4 Schedule I drugs, hard drugs. So it's fentanyl, methamphetamine, cocaine, and heroin. So that went from felony to a misdemeanor, which is basically a ticket, almost nothing. That then wiped out what are called the drug courts in the state. At that time, 10 years ago, when it's still a felony to have even small amounts of these Schedule I drugs, a judge could say you can go and do your time in jail, or you can go to rehab. That was gone. There was no longer any incentive for anyone to accept rehab because they weren't going to go to jail anyway. So we created a drug free-for-all, and we removed that nudge to be able to push someone to change their life. And I brought along a book to share with your viewers, which speaks about the fentanyl and the methamphetamine crisis in the country. It's by a really talented former LA Times reporter, Sam Quinones. It's called The Least of Us. And he did a deep dive over the last several years into the emerging fentanyl and methamphetamine crisis in this country. And let me just go off to the side for a moment and talk a little bit about those two drugs. Methamphetamine, otherwise known as speed, is now being made in great amounts, very cheaply, and it's a different chemicals that are being used now to make it, slightly different. And it's been proven in research that it changes the brain chemistry. And people actually become psychotic. They lose touch with reality. It's so strong that even if you stop using it, it takes over a year for your brain chemistry to reset to something approaching normal. So you're out there, and it explains a lot of this very bizarre behavior that we're seeing on people acting out on the streets of our state or our nation. And then the fentanyl, 50 times as strong as heroin and exceptionally cheap. Easily reformulated with other drugs so that it looks like prescription medicine, something you might take like Xanax or something like that, some kind of a depressant or something. These drugs are pervasive, and one of the things that Quinones points out is that other states that did not decriminalize these 4 drugs still have the ability to say, do you want to go to jail or do you want to go to rehab? And he gives example after example after example of where people change their lives by choosing rehab being successful, and then they go on to an entirely new chapter in their life. And he actually calls for the amendment of Prop 47 to return to give judges in California the option to say you do jail or you do rehab. This repeal, which your viewers can find at Fix 47, you simply go online, fill out a form with your address, they'll send you the petition, get your family, your neighbors to sign it. They have about half the signatures they need to put it on the ballot in November. The other thing that it will do is that in the original Prop 47, if you stole something worth more than $450, it was a felony. Well, 10 years ago, we raised that to $950. So that's why the governor recently remarked that while he was in a pharmacy, he saw somebody just walk out without paying for something. And he remarked upon it to the sales clerk, and she just looked at him and said, "You're responsible for that." Because he had supported the original Prop 47 when he was mayor of San Francisco. And he tried to, say, no, that wasn't right. He could still be arrested on a misdemeanor. And said, nobody bothers. It's a waste of the cop's time. It doesn't happen. And so one of the things that the Fix Prop 47, or it's just called N47, I think it's a little of a misnomer, it would drop it back to $450, and it would allow a prosecutor to accumulate various misdemeanors. It would then be in the best interest of the shop owner and the police to give them misdemeanor, so maybe it only took $100 worth of stuff. But when it added up to $450, you got a felony again, and then you have jail time.
There are a lot of different opinions about Prop 47. 2 years ago, we made a documentary called California Crime Wave, and we analyzed and dug into all the laws that could have an impact on crime in California. You can get this documentary. It's now available for free on the link below in the comments. You can click on the link below in the comments and watch this documentary. Now let's go back to the opinion.
So the other thing that's important in the rewrite that's being circulated, fentanyl is such a new drug, it's not literally in our state law as for treatment as possession as a felony. So it adds fentanyl to that list. It also gives prosecutors the ability to warn drug traffickers that if someone dies from one of these Schedule IV drugs, you will be very likely prosecuted for murder or for some other great harm, as well as adding fentanyl. If you sell it, you're responsible for what happens to the people that take it. Parenthetically say that it's important for this audience is watching this today to know this has nothing to do with marijuana. Marijuana will remain legal throughout the state, and no one should be concerned that voting for this is going to in any way affect the recreational use of marijuana. Please get the petition, sign it, let's get it on the ballot, and let's start helping these people by nudging them to take rehab, and let's save our business and retail communities from these terrible smash and grabs and make it a felony again to engage in that kind of theft.
Do you agree with this opinion? Let us know in the comment section below. And also don't forget to click on the link below and watch the full documentary.